Thank you very much, David, and thank you for the invitation to speak to you this morning. I'm going to start off really where Steve has just left off and think about the policy context and take as a starting point really the Chancellor's budget. And his speech a fortnight ago, which, as Steve has just said he aimed to inject into the tank of the British economy. Now, an apt choice of words, I think, given that movement on our transport network, and particularly our roads, which carry 80% of journeys in the UK, isn't just a bellwether for the economy. It's a driver for growth. And the Chancellor's plan for growth, which he talked about focusing on a renewed focus on manufacturing, sees Britain carried aloft by the march of the maker, is what he said. Well, to my mind, success here is going to really very much depend on how quickly and how effectively we can move goods and people to and from our cities and to and from our factories to markets far afield. Now, the CBI speaks for all businesses in all sectors and across all regions and nations of the UK, and our view on this is pretty clear. And that is to ensure that the private sector can drive growth, pick up the slack from reduced government and consumer spending that we all know about, and create jobs. It's going to need the confidence to invest in the UK. And a world-class transport network supporting a world-class logistics sector will help provide this confidence. The direct return on investment in transport infrastructure in terms of jobs and growth we think is pretty considerable, and work that the CBI did along with the UK Contractors Group shows that for every £1 spent on major construction projects, that delivers GDP growth of close to £3. And long term, improved efficiency in our transport networks boost the bottom line of all companies in all sectors for whom transport costs account for between 5 and 10% of total expenditure. But we are some way, I think, from the goal of a world-class transport network in the UK. And in large parts of the UK, particularly at peak times, we all know the network is saturated. And congestion on our roads in particular is, we contend, a brake on British business, as freight deliveries, commuters and business travellers lose time stuck in traffic. And the costs aren't just measured in terms of frustration. It's estimated that UK businesses lose £8 billion a year as a result of road congestion, a figure set to double by 2025. And journey time reliability for freight and for passengers was identified as the #1 priority issue by CBI members in a 2009 report we did on the whole transport network. And 85% of our members say poor reliability damages their productivity. So when the network fails to deliver, it hurts business badly. Now, a year ago, the CBI published a new report called Tackling Congestion, Driving Growth, which was looking at the impact of hold-ups on the road network for the UK economy and how we can reduce them. Now, of course, since then, much has changed. We have a new coalition government. We've had an emergency budget. We've had a spending review that's putting us back on the path to fiscal health, as Steve was saying. And in the run-up to that review, the CBI was lobbying hard for public capital expenditure on infrastructure to be maintained. And we were pleased to see that significant levels of spending have been protected over the next 5 years. And the Prime Minister launched the first ever and very welcome National Infrastructure Plan at the CBI's annual conference last autumn, which set out a new vision for transport policy. We've seen a green light for Crossrail. We've seen detailed plans for a new high-speed rail line. We've seen £18 billion of investment in rail projects. We've seen changes to the infrastructure planning system coming through, and some movement towards a strategy for aviation. And while we might not agree with all the specifics of everything that's going on, the government is clearly committed to action. But of course, there is one significant absence: roads. Instead of a strategic vision, we have a policy of make do and mend. While £200 million of investment in tackling potholes is very welcome and vital to fix roads up and down the economy, won't deliver network-wide improvements. And this lack of vision, we think, is tying us to a roads policy that is tentative, unplanned, and consistently falling short. So I'd like to address three things very briefly today. One was what the CBI wants in terms of an action plan for the roads network. Two, how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to attract private sector investment? And three, how we can bring users, road users on board, demonstrating value of change by reliable journey times. Now, the government's plan for growth, which George Osborne announced a couple of weeks ago, provides no specific vision for the road network. But of course, as I said, we're very pleased that the government has learned from the long-term consequences of previous recessions and opted to protect capital investment in transport with over 30 billion over 5 years, including 4 billion for the Highways Agency to invest in strategic roads. But with road traffic likely to increase by a third by 2025, these spending commitments, we think, must be accompanied by a clear vision for the major road network. And the CBI has supported for some time a national policy statement for our roads and rail networks that would do just this. The fact that such a statement is still sitting in a drawer in Whitehall, we think, is very worrying. We urgently need this statement to set out the missing strategy to give investors, supply chain operators and business users confidence. Initiatives such as the Managed Motorway Scheme and the rollout of charging points for electric vehicles do demonstrate the value of a clear strategic oversight, approaching the network as a whole with a focus on key objectives. And as planning decisions could be devolved to local level through the government's localism bill, direction from central government, we think, has become more important than ever to establishing long-term faith in the planning decision-making process and necessary to unlock private capital. So we're repeating our call and talking to government about the need for a national policy statement for our road and rail networks that needs to be delivered as a matter of urgency.